Thank you for agreeing to this interview as part of my history class at Sacramento City College. As part of this class, we are acting as working historians by doing this interview. Our goal is to create a record of the COVID era because we know this will be seen as a historic moment in the future. I have a few questions for you. Let's begin. Did you experience a transition from in-person to online during COVID? If so, how did that affect your ability to learn?
I did, and it basically caused me to nearly fail 2 classes. Just the transition from in-person to online was really messy because nobody really knew what they were doing. There wasn't a lot of guidance or structure. So it was really hard to keep up with work and figure out what things that were given out at the beginning of the semester were we still doing, which weren't. And there's not a lot of guidance from the teachers on how to go about turning things like booklets. We'd get a booklet that had all the labs and stuff we were doing in it, and were we supposed to take a picture of every single page of that book and turn it in? Were we supposed to drive to school and drop it off? There wasn't a whole lot of instruction on how to figure that out or on what to do. So.
Got it. Would you mind sharing your major with us and how that specifically impacted the classes you were taking?
I'm going for an electrical engineering certification, and I was taking some side classes in electronics and electronic math. So it made it difficult to keep up with the math because since it wasn't online to begin with, we didn't have a program that we used to turn everything in. It was all just worksheets and by hand, so that made it difficult. It kind of just stalled out the electrician's class I was taking for about 1.5 years because they couldn't figure out how to do it remote, so they just stopped it until they felt that COVID was low enough of a problem that they could hold it in person again.
That makes sense because that would require a lot of hands-on training.
Mm-hmm.
Did you experience a transition from in-person to remote work during COVID? If so, how do you think that affected your ability to do your job?
I didn't, because I work in a grocery store, so you can't really remote distance that. So, no, I got to stay in person the entire time, which was its own little fun adventure.
Got it. How did the COVID experience affect you as a parent or caregiver? How do you think COVID affected the person or people you are caring for?
Well, I didn't become a parent until more towards the end of the original COVID pandemic. So it didn't affect me too much as a parent, other than, worrying about being in the hospital with my kid and going to doctor's checkups and stuff, and being in a setting that probably has a lot of disease spread already. But my girlfriend was pregnant for a good chunk of the COVID pandemic, so that was a little difficult, being isolated from a lot of people and a lot of the support network that's there for that type of thing, and having to figure out how to navigate that on our own. And of course, the constant visits to the doctor, and having a pregnant girlfriend while trying to avoid COVID is difficult.
As the other parent in the situation, I have a couple follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
To be ready. What was it like knowing that I had COVID and finding out that I was also pregnant?
It was stressful, worrying about how being pregnant and having COVID would affect you, with the additional strain on the body would cause the disease to be worse, and also if it would affect our child in any way was kind of a constant worry in the back of my mind until he was born. I mean, even now we don't know for certain. All the signs point to being healthy, but we don't know if there's going to be some developmental issues in the future due to COVID, or if we would even know if they were because of COVID.
So you were not allowed in for any of the doctor's appointments except the initial appointment. Do you feel like you missed out on things since you had to hear secondhand from me all of the information in regards to our son?
A little bit, but not really. You're pretty good about communicating that kind of thing to me, so it was a little annoying not being able to be there to help you out through those things, but in terms of communication, I don't think that was really a problem.
Thank you. How did going through COVID change your routine on a daily basis?
Just making sure I had sanitizers and masks with me whenever I went anywhere, or trying to figure out how, if I got somewhere without a mask, how I could get one, because the stores were usually pretty good about providing them, but just, it increased my checklist before I go, instead of just like, if I wanted to go get coffee, instead of just hopping in the car and going there, it was okay, got a mask, sanitizer, try to make sure the places weren't too busy. And if it was worth finding, another place that was less crowded at the time.
Got it. What role did social media and the news play in your experiences during COVID?
Moderate in that there were a few people that I either had as friends or still have who would fall on the more conspiracy end of the COVID opinion spectrum that I had to deal with and try to. I felt like I had to try to convince them that it wasn't a conspiracy, it was an actual issue. I lost a couple people because of that. Not that I was really close with, so it wasn't a huge loss, but it was still a little bit of a loss. And having family that believes that is difficult to navigate around. In terms of news, it was just, there was so much information coming at you so fast that you didn't know whether it was true or not, just because we didn't know have a lot of information at the time. So, something might happen, like there was reports of like zoo animals being testing positive for COVID, and wondering whether, animals in general would be a vector for that. So just trying to parse out what was actually important information versus what was just kind of stuff that was being reported because nobody really knew what was important yet. So it was pretty mentally taxing.
Absolutely. How do you think going through COVID has shaped you as an individual? For instance, since you were born before March of 2020, obviously, who are you now? What has changed about you?
I'm a lot more assertive. Some might say aggressive. Like I said, I didn't get to do remote work. I had an in-person job, and our store initiated a mask policy, and it was one of the few companies to actually enforce it on customers coming in. So I was a manager at the time, and I felt that it was partially my duty to help enforce it. Even if I was like a low-level manager, I felt like it was my duty to help enforce it, so it didn't fall on either the other just regular employees or the cashiers at the front who were taking the brunt of it. And as you might imagine, the people who tried to come in without masks were on the more self-righteous, aggressive end, so I had to kind of match that so they wouldn't try to run me over and like make it somebody else's problem. So I had to deal with that at least weekly, if not multiple times a week. So I just became more assertive overall, less timid, I guess. So less of conflict avoidant.
How did going through COVID change the way you think about the future?
I don't really know, honestly. It's just working in like the idea of COVID as like a factor in what I'm doing, I guess. It's made me want to get a job that's a little more outside of the public sector, so I'm not quite as at risk, and I'm not won't be putting my family as at risk. And I guess I've just moved a lot of the stuff that I might normally do in person or do as a meetup online. So in the future that might change, but it might just be the way I keep doing things now.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your time. I'm going to end this interview in just a moment. This project for my history class is part of a collaboration with Stanford University in their Life in Quarantine Global Archive. If you approve, our interview will be housed online, so we would be online content creators. Are you comfortable with this being online?
Yes.
Thank you for your consent.